You're listening to Table Talks for Life, a Life for Life podcast that prepares youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording to find out how you can be engaged in upholding life too. Welcome to today's Table Talks for Life. We're going to be talking about mothering and fathering, sistering and brothering today. So we're going to take a close look at the family. My name is Michelle Bauman. I am the director of Y for Life, and I have three guests here today. I'll have them introduce themselves.
I'm Bonnie Poole. I'm the Y for Life Media Resource Assistant.
Kate Roberts. I'm the Y for Life intern.
And I'm Pastor Hans Fiene. I'm the pastor of Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Crestwood, Missouri, also the creator of Lutheran Satire. It was a multimedia project intended to teach the Lutheran faith by making fun of stuff.
Yeah, and I hear even maybe stand-up comedy might be in your future.
Well, it is. I've already started doing it. Yeah, I've done it a couple of times. Yeah, I noticed there was a big gap in between what people I think are actually trying to find when they go to see comedians, and then what comedians actually deliver to them. So there's a lot of despair and bitterness in comedy, and I think people are actually looking for hope. And so I'm trying to sneakily bring in a confession of hope and peace through the kind of the guise of humor. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Well, you'll have to keep us posted and maybe even send a few video clips. That'd be awesome. I have people that keep asking for that. It'll be a bit before I'm ready to do it's, I'm kind of getting my feet wet and learning my way around it. So I'm not good yet. So I'll wait until I'm good. Okay. Well, it's kind of like if you're doing a diet and someone's like, well, send me pictures. And you're like, I'll wait until I've done it for a while. Right. You don't need pictures of the beginning of it. Right. That's why I'm doing it. Yeah. Right. Okay. So you're practicing. I'm practicing, learning, all that stuff. Gaining the skills. Excellent. Yeah, that's right. And does your family come to these events? No. So, my wife came to the first one. She wasn't able to come last week. My wife is very supportive, but it's a weird thing to do. I'm even kind of a bit cagey with my folks at my congregation because open mic stand-up comedy is okay. So if you go to an open mic night, about a third of the people will be good to all right, somewhere along that spectrum of actual comedians or funny people who are actually working through bits. A third of the people are just on drugs. And then a third of them are varying degrees of demon possessed. So so the stuff you'll hear people say at an open mic night is horrifically vulgar. So I'm trying not to expose too many people to it. So if I kind of worry that folks might have a hard time, kind of separating that from me or from just kind of digesting that, I don't encourage people to come. So there's no way on earth I would ever want my kids. The most clubs are 18 up or 21 up anyway. So, but yeah, I would not want any of my children to, I'm happy for my kids to hear my material, obviously, because it's all clean, but I don't want them anywhere near the other stuff. That's good. That's what a father should do, right? Protect. Yeah. Which leads us right into today's conversation, right? Today's topic. So family. We want to talk all about family today. My first question is family. When was it established? Like when did families come to be? And are these families good? Or good groups to have? Are they good gifts, or is family disposable? Yeah. So family really comes into existence in Eden. It's there from creation. When God looks on man and sees that he's incomplete, that's what God is seeing. When God sees that it's not right for man to be alone, there's not a helper fit for him. So man's ultimate sense of belonging is not going to be satisfied by the animal world, right? This is why I always encourage people. I hear people say stuff like this often. It's become more common for people to become a bit. It's a weird thing. So I'm a very introverted person, despite playing well at gregarious. I'm a much more introverted person in my nature. And so I get really annoyed when I hear people describing themselves as being introverted, but then when asked to describe what that means, they describe being misanthropic and how they hate people. So introverted means I like having real conversations with people, and I don't like small talk and kind of meaningless exchanges. So like my joke of this is, when I go to the grocery store, and I'm buying something, and the lady will scan it and she'll be like, "Oh, that looks good. Is this good?" And I just think I'm going to have to take a nap for 37 years if I answer that question, so that's but I'm happy to talk with people about real things. Introverted does not mean you hate people. It doesn't mean you'd rather stay home and never socialize with anyone. And introverted certainly does not mean that you like animals more than people. I hear people say this often. "Oh, I love dogs more than people." Well, first of all, of course you do. Like, everyone likes dogs more than people because dogs have been genetically bred to love you and serve you and reaffirm everything in you that you want to be good. So that's a cheap, easy love. That's like saying I love the robot that was made by the robot company to tell me I'm good all of the time, But real human communication, real human belonging doesn't come from animals. It comes from other humans, and in particular for a man, it comes from his wife, the one who completes him. So Adam and Eve. Adam is almost complete. He's from a kind of a biological standpoint, he's complete in his respiratory system. He doesn't need anyone else to be able to breathe, and his cardiovascular system doesn't need anyone else for his heart to beat. He's complete in every way, except for, you can kind of find the core of his incompleteness is the fact that his reproductive system is only half of it. And he needs a wife in order to complete that, in order for their bodies to belong together, to fit together, and to then be able to bear children. So Adam is incomplete without Eve. Adam and Eve are complete together, but then there's even a sense of incompleteness there in the fact that Eve's name doesn't mean woman. Eve's name means mother. Adam means man, but Eve means mother, so that the woman is not going to be complete until she actually becomes a mother. And it's there that husband, wife, and child together find their sense of fulfillment and their sense of belonging. So as long as man has existed, or at least after that brief window between Adam's creation and Eve's creation, family has existed. As long as mankind has been, family is the natural way that God brings us into the world. These are the first neighbors that God gives to us. That's something that Luther points out in his commentary in the Large Catechism on the Fourth Commandment, that when we move from the commandments dealing with God, the first table of commandments, commandments 1 through 3, into the next table of commandments, the very first commandment we get is our closest neighbor, which is our mother and father. So we come into this world belonging to our mother and father. And then we belong to our mother and father, at least in the biblical model, until we get married, until until a man leaves his father and mother to join fast to his wife. We've kind of lost this in modern civilization. I think this explains a lot of the arrested development of young Americans, where we have this weird period in between where we leave our parents and then we're nothing, and we live in service of ourselves and our own desires. And then we get married after that. And then people struggle to get married because they spent 10 years living for themselves and couldn't transition back into living for someone else. And so it's kind of an unhealthy way to do things. But so, yeah, we're designed by God, and we see that reflected in Eden, for family to be the manner in which we belong to each other.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the way that you began by talking about how, mankind cannot be satisfied by the animal world, right? That we don't find our meaning or our purpose or our belonging there. The animal world, that part of creation is certainly a gift. But it made me think immediately of the trend for young people to have dogs rather than babies, right? For young people and you're right, to wait. Now there's a good portion of young people who are getting married in college or right after college, and that seems to be growing, but there's also a large portion of the population that's postponing marriage and in the meantime adopting dogs and cats. to try and
they say they're adopting dogs and cats.
Yes.
This is another thing that annoys me. They walked into a building with 4 walls and a roof and gave somebody money in exchange for a dog, which is called buying a dog. But they want to make it seem holier than it is and make it seem more respectable and more like having children. So they call it adopting. And you're like, well, we didn't think you gave birth to it.
Right. Yeah. And I find that idea that even, the phrase dog mom, and those sort of things, like humanizing of animals, it is and I know this is going to make people mad, but it is a perversion of the family in some ways. I don't know if Bonnie or Kate, if you want to step in on that one, just so you know, you might get nasty mail if you do. So, but feel free if you're inclined.
Is like a weirdly hot button thing that if you say you don't like the term, it's like, oh, what? People can have pets, and pets do kind of become family. I've never really felt that way with my pets, but I didn't really grow up with with a dog around. We had a few pets, but I mean, it's I don't think it's wrong. It's a good natural nurturing instinct that we have. We want to love things. We want to love persons, and I think there's nothing wrong with doing that and encouraging that. But because it does replace for a lot of people sort of the sense of taking care of human children or other just people in your family, then that's where I think it becomes a problem. So maybe that's more nuanced. Maybe we've saved ourselves from some hate mail. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, and you're right. There's nothing wrong with caring for animals. That's a good way, even especially for children, to learn some of those techniques for caring. But when it replaces people, we definitely step into a gray area. And you think about loneliness at end of life, loneliness, even at in the nursing homes, or and sometimes some of that loneliness is satisfied by caring for another creature, right? But that wouldn't be the same as a spouse or a child. It's a dog or a cat or a guinea pig, whatever that might be. So, Kate, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I think my only point I wanted to add to this was just that, you see these dog moms or these dog parents, and you go to their houses for dinner, and you just look around and you look at them, and they're not very happy. Mm-hmm. There is a part of something that they are missing, and replacing with this dog or cat or whatever the pet is not fulfilling them in the way that a child would.
Yeah, there's certainly a child is different, right? A child is different from a dog or a cat. A child is a human being, and yes, more work, right? And certainly more joy. You're right. And a very different creature, a creature that by God's grace, the family begets, the husband and wife begets, rather than, as Pastor Fiene mentioned, purchases. So yeah.
Children are not, this kind of, I think, shows the way that our culture thinks, is that they actually view dogs and children, or pets and children, as the same way, as a kind of accessory that you add to your life when you feel like you're ready for it. So in a lot of ways, people will use pets as a sort of dry run for having kids, as a kind of dip your toe into the realm of, well, all right, well, animals are not quite as responsibility consuming as children are, but you got to take them for walks, you got to feed them. So you a little bit sort of dip your toe into the world of having to schedule your life around someone else. But they're not but humans were designed to live their lives in service for other people. And while there may be measures of responsibility that you have in caring for a pet, I get, going back to stand-up comedy, I saw a comedian a couple of weeks ago here in town who was talking about how she has dogs instead of pets, and how she thinks that should count as having children because you have to clean up their poo. And my thought was, it doesn't count because no one looks down on you, because the reaction is much different if you put your son down when he's 13 and starts to get a little gimpy, right? Like the level of, that definitely doesn't go over as well for the world, because there's an honor that human beings have, but also because there's a greater responsibility, and there is a completion of the human existence that you can't find apart from where God has designed it to happen. So it kind of, in the same way that we talk about marriage and how marriage is between a man and a woman, it's not just a matter of how society recognizes it, but two men cannot complete each other as close of friends as they can be. They can't give each other the kind of completion and belonging that a man and a woman have, because their very bodies and minds were not designed to produce that kind of union.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to kind of build on that union that's intended to be life affirming, in your opinion, how does the family uphold life? How is the family designed by nature to be life affirming? You mentioned, the putting down of the dog, right?
Right.
But we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't think of doing that with our children when something's happened to them, right?
Right.
So how is the family uniquely life affirming? Your thoughts?
Well, so I think first of all, you obviously have the fact that for a mother grows the child in her womb, and that's so that through her own body, through the energy, through the food that she's consuming, she's feeding her child, she's growing her child. Then the food that feeds the child for the first year or so of the child's life comes from the mother. I remember when I was in school, and one of our teachers was trying to convince us that women were not by nature more nurturing than men. It was just sort of a social conditioning to make them that way.
Sure.
And I just remember going back to this idea of, well, but the food that feeds the baby comes out of your body and not his body. So you're obviously going to be better at if life experience didn't teach you that in a million different ways, just the sheer biological reality of it. God gives men greater strength to protect the lives of their children. I love watching nature documentaries, and in large part because no matter how much these nature documentaries are loaded up with atheistic Darwinian presuppositions, they always reaffirm and strengthen my faith. Because when you watch other species being born, like a giraffe is born and just falls out of its mother from 10 feet up in the air, and then is walking in 15 minutes and can eat right away and knows how to do it, right? And humans, you look at humans and you're like, we can't do anything forever, and we're not designed to live in like the vast majority of the climates of the world. So the only way that we exist is because of God's specific direct creation of us and his direct provision of us. So you see this in fathers, that fathers have to tame this fallen creation to protect their children from heat, to protect their children from cold, to protect their children from destruction and from enemies and all sorts of things, so that you come into this world utterly helpless and not even able to eat food, and you need your mother to provide from her very own flesh the food that feeds you, and you need your father to fend off a million attacks against you that you couldn't otherwise defend yourself. So family is life oriented from the very beginning. And likewise too, obviously if a couple can't have children and that's the cross they've been given to bear, that doesn't make a husband and wife any less married, and it doesn't make them any less of a family. But at the same time, we shouldn't let the exceptions to the rule drive our understanding of the rule, and that there's a reason why when a couple finds out that they're going to have a child, that's really the moment when they feel like we're now a family, because there's a life that has come forth from our union And that life that we give everything to protect and defend and nurture and care for, that life is the sign of God's completeness upon you.
Yeah, and you can see that protection, as a wife, who's had a couple of kids, that protection kick in, right? There may be that protection from a husband for a wife, and yet, and I've spoken about this before on other podcasts. The things that you do for a child are very different from the sacrificial love that you give your spouse, right? The sacrificial love you show your child, you don't usually have to wipe your spouse's bottom or feed your spouse food, or, and the truth is, and I saw in my husband, he always had that desire to protect me. And yet, until I was pregnant, when I became pregnant, that desire, you could see changed, transformed. Yeah. There was a care there when I was experiencing morning sickness, or when I needed him just simply to help me put on my shoes, right? Or concern about was I getting enough rest with the work I was doing outside the home, and even that protection begins before birth, right? That life-affirming protection, that protection of the family, and just as my care, my nurturing for our child happened from the moment of conception on, right? A moment of fertilization on, and so, yeah, I think we do see that. You do see those natural tendencies, and God-given gifts that affirm life. What do you think, Kate, Bonnie? Do you want to jump in?
I would add that it's the first place, like your first social sphere, which I think Pastor Fiene, you mentioned, but you just have a place. It's a role that you're given. So whether you're the parent or the child, brother, sister, you just learn how to live with one another, which obviously is hugely beneficial to your growth and development. And you just learn how to live, like how do you resolve conflict? What does it mean to be in relationship to another person? And just being shown essentially unconditional love, what should be unconditional love. Obviously, there are broken families where we don't see these things played out, but ideally, you're just as a child, receiving like love and nurturing that is the model of God's love to us. And so along with that, then the family upholds life because it's where we should be taught the faith, one of the places. And so that's kind of what it's all about, like teaching your children to have faith in their Savior and being rescued from eternal death and having eternal life. So, and then lastly, as I was thinking about this, more from the parent's perspective, with the work that I've been doing to develop our lesson plan for life on suicide, is that having dependence is a protective factor against suicide. And so that you have children, that you have people who depend on you, is protective against depression and suicide. And then so is having a sense of belonging. And that's something that family can bring, whether you're a parent or a child.
Right. The idea that you're needed, right? The reality that you're needed. And the truth is, as human beings, we are needed, we are loved. But family is a tangible way to experience that, to see it, to feel it, to recognize it. You're right. And I'm so glad you brought in, the faith component, because then again, that is not only life affirming for this world, but also for the next, right? That is the ultimate hope of every Christian parent, that they will be able to spend eternity with their children. And so, and that in and of itself is the gift of life. That's great. Kate, your thoughts?
I think we've touched on most of my thoughts already. I think mostly just family gives you a purpose, and it gives you accountability, and it forces you to give up your selfish desires and really truly serve one another.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with you, Kate. So you can maybe get more talk time on our next question then. So what does it mean then to be, in your opinion, a mother, a father, a sister, or a brother? Maybe start with a sister. What is that role? What is that vocation? What do you think?
Maybe skip me on this one.
Okay, I'll come back to you. All right, Bonnie, you want to jump in?
That's so funny, Kate, because I felt the same way about this question. So I guess now I'm a sister, a daughter, and a mother. I think in any situation, in any whichever role you have in a family, it's about self-sacrifice. And I think that you don't really realize that until maybe you have the parent role. Like growing up, I did not care like I should about you know, letting my siblings have the better thing or considering their feelings all the time before mine. But one thing that I always remember one time, it was my church cantor's wife saying something to me once, like I was helping my younger sister with something at church, and she said to me, "That's one thing I always notice about you Egger children. You're always looking out for one another." And it just had stuck with me because I remember being really annoyed at my sister at the time. I think she was upset about, I don't know, she felt like she missed my mom, or I really don't remember what the situation was, but it just really stuck with me that's sort of the role, that you're looking out for one another, that your siblings, whether or not you like each other at the moment, really do have your back. It just gives you like a web of people upholding you. So we talk about upholding your life. You just have all these people around you, even if, and really that's the model of love, even if you don't like each other, right? Love is an action, so that you're doing the things necessary to love someone, whether or not you really feel like it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm love that you brought in love as an action, right? That's one of the things I speak on quite frequently, that love is not a feeling. It is something that we do. And there are ways we love people, whether we are happy with them or not, right? Whether we are pleased with them or not. Love is an action. So these are the things we carry out. Good. Well, I'm going to pass it on to Pastor Fiene then, see what he thinks. What is it then to be a mother or father, a sister or brother?
Yeah, one of the great things about being a Christian, and in particular, for Lutherans, we have a really strong focus on the doctrine of vocation, which is to me one of my greatest joys about being a Lutheran, is understanding who you are and what your calling is and what your station in life is based on what God has given to you. And a great thing about the various vocations of father and mother and sister and brother is that these familial vocations, husband and wife as well, they're not vocations that God gives to you without without a very specific job description. This is why, so when I do weddings, I don't have, one of the rules I have for if I do weddings is I don't let couples write their own vows, because if you all want to pledge to each other that you're always going to let the other person have the last bite of mint chocolate chip or whatever kind of special personalized things to your relationship you think are cute, I don't have anything against that, and I don't have a problem with people saying, this is how we want to express our desire to honor each other. But as a pastor, my job is to ensure that you know what the biblical definition of husband and wife is, what those definitions are. And I need to make sure that you're pledging to fulfill the job description that God wrote for you in the scriptures. And so the great thing about this is, as a husband, I don't have to figure out for myself what that means. But I mean, when I say I want to couples, by the way, don't ask to write your own vows, because I won't let you do it. The guys are always like, "Thank you so much," because I didn't want to do that, right? Because as a man, it's like, well, I want to get this right, but I gotta figure this thing out for myself. Well, I don't know what that means. But the reality is that Christ in his role as the loving bridegroom of his bride, the church, shows us what that job description is. And the husband lays down his life for his wife. The husband protects his wife. The husband defends his wife, serves his wife, just as the wife respects her husband and listens to him, hears his voice and follows it. So that as a husband and as a wife, your job descriptions are given to you there in the scriptures, and in the same way with father and mother, right? So this is why it is that for men who are atheists, it's a very strong possibility that they had very poor relationships with their fathers, because you learn how to be a Christian, in particular as a man, through your father. Your father teaches you what it means to be loving, what it means to be protecting, what it means to be just and merciful. And when your father doesn't do those things, it becomes very, very difficult to understand how you could positively view God as a father. But so God gives us, through his mercy, through his steadfast love, gives us the job description of what it means to be a father. And then through the church, he shows us the same thing with mothers. That what does the church do for Christians? The church washes them clean. The church proclaims and leads them to Christ. The church shelters them from the miseries and the sorrows of this world and delivers them into the protection of her bride. But that's, by the way, when we got to be careful not to push our family metaphors too far, because the church is your mother, but Christ is your brother, but the church is married to. So it gets a little, the analogies get a little incestuous if you mix them too much. But we get the idea there that this is the great blessing of being a Christian and of viewing of being as a husband or a father or a brother, whatever those vocations might be. This isn't a job description where you have to fill it out for yourself. Like, I don't know if you ever met people, you ask them, what do you do for a living? And then they tell you something where you feel like you would have to do more work to figure out what their job actually is than they actually have to do at that job.
Yes.
And right. So that's not what we're dealing with in the Christian faith. It's, this is not an accounts payable executive of fund transfer systems or whatever weird jobs people have. This is a vocation where Christ has shown you what the qualifications are, and therefore shown you how it is that you are to live.
Yeah, I think of the table of duties that's provided for us even in the catechism, and I think Luther does a good job of explaining some of those roles and even relationships between child and parent, right? And we've been putting together, Bonnie and I, an infographic on gender, and really, wanting to fine tune this infographic to make sure that what we're saying is biblical and accurate, and to get it as correct as possible, right? And so we've even talked about how these roles, they aren't interchangeable, and even the things that we do as men and women, we might do the same thing, but we do them in different ways, right? Because of the gift of gender, because of the gift of sex and biology, and the roles that God gives us. And so I guess, and this question isn't on the sheet, but in general, would you say that those roles and the ways in which we do things are similar for the Christian and the non-Christian? What do you think about that? Are they the same, or are they not? Does God's word not only shape those who know the word, but also our very created forms, our very beings? Do they shape the way that we do things?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would certainly say that the vocation is the qualification or the requirements are the same, regardless of whether or not you're a believer. It's not just, I mean, obviously any Christian will teach his children to know Christ and to trust in his mercy, but that is absolutely the job of every parent on the planet. It doesn't become your job once you come to the faith. So any parent who's failing to do that, any parent who's leading his child into idolatry, is certainly in that sense failing as a parent. But of course, we draw the distinction between, a kind of civil righteousness and divine righteousness, and so we recognize that there are some people whose false beliefs lead the world into misery and chaos, and then there are other ones that don't have those same kind of social effects. So for example, so any Mormon parent is failing as a parent if he's teaching his son to deny the Trinity, but Mormons are still pretty good neighbors, and you'd be pretty happy for your kids to play with the Mormon kids next door, because they usually tend to have their kids raised to be respectful of authority and to be well behaved and kind and things of that nature. But yeah, the religious aspect of parenthood is an essential part of it that we certainly can't separate.
Yeah. What about those who may not have family? So we think about the child that has been taken out of his or her home for necessary reasons, or maybe the elderly individual whose loved ones have died, right? Or whose kids are far away. Still, there is family, but maybe not family present. So what about, can we, first of all, I guess, can we ever say that we are without the gift of family? And then if we can, what happens? What should happen for the individual who is lacking family? Your thoughts?
You asking me?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Well, yeah, sorry, I don't want to monopolize the
No,
conversation here,
that's
but
fine.
yeah, I mean, I think, there's a sense in which we can say certainly some people don't have a family. I mean, just as an objective reality, in the same way that we can say some people don't have any arms or legs. But we recognize that as a reality, but not as a good, not as a by design thing. So there are some people who can't see. There are some people that are blind, but your eyes were designed to work. Your eyes were designed not to. I don't like. There's been a trend recently where instead of using the term disabled, people will use the term differently abled, which to me is incredibly condescending to people. Like, oh, some people have legs that work, but you have a different ability, which is that your legs don't work. Like, that's just horribly condescending. Of course, it's a disability. It doesn't mean that you define the person by it. But sure. So of course there are people that have whose parents have died, who have been separated from family, whose loved ones have died. Is a pastor. One of the things that's odd is when you'll have someone in your congregation who's 96 die, and they're beloved and kind, and you expect to have hundreds of people at the funeral, but then you get there and there's hardly anyone there, and it's just because they outlived everybody that they knew. So they got a couple of kids and grandkids there, and that's about it. So I think we want to draw a distinction there between saying, of course, everybody has a family in the sense that everyone has a mother and father, even kids who aren't raised by their mother and father, even kids who have no relationship with their biological mother and father. That's still how they came into existence. So there is something there that was supposed to be intact that was broken. And then families are obviously broken in other ways. People get alienated from one another and whatnot. But then there's also the larger component to things, which is even if your family all dies, even if you have no one left alive who you're still connected to biologically, as a Christian, you have a greater family, which is the church. You see this reflected in the words of Christ when he's in his earthly ministry, when his mother and brothers come to see him, and he gestures to the crowd and he says, whoever does the will of God is my mother and my brother and my sister. Right. So that the Christian family, which is where we share the same birth from above, we have the same father in God, we have the same brother in Christ, we have the same mother in the church, and we were born of the same womb of the baptismal font. That is a higher and greater union than the union that is just of flesh. So as much glory and honor as God has given to the family that's united together by blood, he's given an even greater honor and union to those who are united together through the one Lord, the one faith, and the one baptism. So even for people who may be alienated from their biological families or separated from them in some way, whose family members may have all died, what they do have, as long as they believe, is they have the church. They have the far greater union that makes a family out of people of all nations, tribes, and tongues through a common confession of Christ.
Yeah, and the truth that we do have the church as a family. There is no one who is made to be alone, nor really does God desire that, right? And so what is it that churches can do then, or individuals or families, other families? What can we do for those maybe who are absent a father or absent a family, or couples that desire children? What sort of things? And I'm going to start with Kate and Bonnie here. Can we be doing as a church to bring family to the orphan, or to the widowed, or to the lonely? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I guess my thought on that is, Pastor Fiene was talking about that 96-year-old that has outlived everyone, and it is our job as fellow Christians to look around our congregations and say, you know what, that is my family now. And you just integrate yourself in their life. You go bring them a meal, you offer to come clean their house, you spend time with them, you pray with them, you pray for them. I guess that would be my initial thought on something like that.
Okay.
And I think that idea can just be applied to whoever is without family. So whether that's, maybe it's not the elderly person, though I think, yeah, that's super important, like shut-in ministry at churches. I think a lot of times that's left only to the pastor, and I think that's very sad because, they were in our pews. I care a lot about this particular subject, so I'm going to go back to it. But like they were in our pews, and then one day they weren't because they can't make it to church anymore. And why is it only the pastor that sees the shut-in, or maybe once a year for your Christmas caroling? So anyway, yeah, just reaching out to the shut-ins, people, whose children don't live near, maybe same situation, going to see them, inviting them into your own family. Obviously, the most obvious example of that is like with foster care and adoption, where someone does not have a family and you make them your family. But anyone of any age who maybe they are in their 20s and have moved away and just don't have anyone near, just invite them into your own home. I mean, if you have a stable family, that's really the best gift that you can give them. So yeah, on an individual or family level, just bringing people who need a family into yours and not making it sort of relegating it only to your flesh and blood, recognizing that you have a gift that you can offer others. And then, yeah, on the church scale, just working with your congregation members to create programs that do the same thing, but on a bigger scale. So I feel like so much of those social service type of things have been moved to the government. And so churches feel what used to be, obviously, the job of the church has become less and less, not really less and less needed, but the government or other organizations have taken on that role. And so it almost feels like, well, we don't need to, but we do need to. And the government is not offering people the hope of the gospel and the joy of having a family in Christ.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Bonnie. When we talk about, people needing, the church needing to step in, right? The church to take those roles back, or at least to work alongside, if the government is going to care. But you're right; those were initially those tasks were given to the church. That was given to the Christian community to support one another, and it was not only, we shouldn't see that as a command, but an opportunity to affirm life, to uphold life, to share the gospel, to grieve with those who grieve and to rejoice with those who rejoice. I think of like in our congregation, and you see this across the nation, people move away from home. Right. And though millennials and Gen Zers seem to be moving back much more than Gen Xers are, you still have the even just a family without relatives, right? Without grandparents, without aunts and uncles. And so the church provides some of those opportunities, as pastor's family. And you know this, being a pastor's kid, and Kate, you know this as well. Very often you are living in a community that doesn't have extended family. So on Grandparents' Day, who do you bring, right? When the school has Grandparents' Day or those sorts of things. And so, providing, we are blessed with a wonderful church that has provided those things for our children, and we have been blessed with, my parents being able to move down here near us so that our kids could be, near grandparents. But that's not the case for everyone, right? And I know, even in our church, we try to have some opportunities for, especially the holidays, right? In between services, my husband and I will invite people over, or Thanksgiving, if we know someone doesn't have somewhere to go, right? A family to be with. And so we can provide those things as a church, and be watching for those opportunities. I know Kate and Pastor Fiene, you both have some experience with fostering. I don't know if you want to share any of, anything that you think would be helpful to our listeners as far as the benefits or the blessings of fostering.
Sure. So yeah, my wife and I have been certified foster parents for, I want to say maybe around 8 years now, something like that. We've had overall 10 or 11 kids placed with us. We currently have an 8-month-old girl with us that we love very, very dearly. She's been with us since she was 12 days old. We adopted a son. My son Levi was originally a foster placement, and he came to us when he was 4 months old. So fostering, it's necessary. It needs to happen. We need more foster parents in the system. System's a mess, and it's maddeningly inefficient and foolish. And it could not possibly be one run worse in many ways. At least it seems that way. But these kids need a mother and father. They need a home. They need stability. They need someone to love them while their families work to getting them back, which sometimes happens. And it's great, and God be praised when that does happen, because that's the best possible solution for them, is to be raised by their mother and father. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and they come up for adoption, and then God provides them a new family in that way, provides them a mother and father in that way. So I highly recommend people get involved in it, not because it will always be the most rewarding experience of your life. It will rip your guts out at times. It'll give you the profoundest and greatest joys of your life, obviously. But do it because these kids need it. And in a situation where their family structure is broken, and they need someone to kind of hold them up amidst the rubble. And as a Christian, God provides you a kind of unique perspective on how to do that, because you learn how to, you have commandments against coveting, and you learn how to recognize, and you believe in authority, so that when the state speaks and says, this is not your child, it's not your child. And when the state, armed with God's authority, says, this is your child, then that child is your child. So Christians are kind of uniquely dispositioned to be content in all things. So I highly recommend it. Don't say to yourself, oh, I could never give those. I just don't think I could do it because I couldn't give the kids back. First of all, don't say that to people who foster, because we're bad at that too. That like we're not just like, oh, we'll finally get this right. That's not what happens. But no one's good at that. Right. You should do it not because you would be good at it, but not because you'd be good at giving a child back, but because you'd be good at holding a kid up while it's happening. So if God has given you the unique strength to do that, and then you should.
Any thoughts, Kate?
Yeah, I think Pastor Fiene pretty much hit the nail on the head with all of that. It's an amazing opportunity. My family has been fostering for about 4 years. We've only had one placement, and we recently adopted him in November and got to bring him to the baptismal waters in May. So that was amazing. It truly does. Every single person in my family would agree exposes the most sinful, selfish parts of you. Like Pastor Fiene said, it is the most inefficient, maddening system ever. But you have an opportunity to give a child a stable home and share the gospel with them. And even if you only have them for a short time, or maybe they're in your family for forever, but either way, it is so impactful, both on them and on you. You will never be the same person again. And yeah, it is frustrating when you have to give them back, and that is painful. But we're not supposed to run from painful circumstances or run away from things that are hard or hurtful. It's definitely not for everyone, but if even a little part of you is like, maybe, then you probably should look into it.
Yeah, there's one of the ways in which I think almost everyone in the universe is wrong about something, and I'm right, is a thing that this is a thing I learned when I was in the seminary. So I'm a wannabe musician, and when I was in college, I was in a band, and I wanted to be a rock tenor. I wanted to have an amazing rock voice, and I don't. That's not my range. Those are not the vocal cords that God gave to me. I'm a low baritone, and I have a kind of and I have a voice that would have worked incredibly well for country music, but I don't like country music. So I could never figure out what's going on here. God gave me the ability to sing, but this isn't lining up with anything. And then I got to the seminary and I was in Lutheran worship class and we started chanting the liturgy. And I was like, dang it. It's what my voice is for. That's what the notes are there for. They just fit perfectly with the notes on the page. And so the realization came upon me that a big part of living the Christian life is accepting it when God makes you good at things you don't want to do. I've also learned as a pastor, I won't boast of much about me being a pastor because I'm a miserable failure at it in a lot of ways, but I'm very good at writing funeral sermons. I will boast of that. I'm very good at knowing how to discuss the work of God in this person's life. I'm great at funeral sermons, but I hate doing them because it means someone has to die for me to do the thing that I'm the best at. It's like, so there's the lesson in all of this is we got to get this idea out of our heads that we should only do the things that we feel good about doing well. There are a lot of things you're going to be amazing at in life that you don't want to do. And one of those could very well be caring for a child whose parents are drug addicted and trying to help heal that bond of trying to keep that fraying string of a connection to a mother or father from snapping altogether. That's not a fun thing to do. You are 100% a psychopath if you enjoy that, right? But you might be good at it. And if you're good at it, if God has given you the ability to do it, you should do it.
Any other comments? I think you're absolutely right. I can think of lots of things that I prefer not to do, but
Right.
it has been given, right?
Yeah.
So, and I love the idea or the phrase that you had, Kate, we aren't called to run away from hard things, right? But as Christians, we know there will be trials and suffering and hardship, and that is part of it as well. So, yeah. All right, last question. How do you think we can best strengthen not only families in the church, but our own family? Your thoughts?
I feel like I keep talking first, so I don't want to talk first.
Okay. Bonnie, Kate?
I can go. I just have to think of what I'm going to say and whether it's going to come out cohesive. Well, I think it's just something I'm learning as I've started my own family, and I do live very close to my parents. So I was kind of thinking, Pastor Fiene, as you were saying, the concept of like leaving your father and mother and becoming a new family, all just kind of ties in to like what we think a family is and how they should function. And I think that the Christian view of family is, although we have the same definition, right? Mother, father, children, is very different in a lot of ways from what the world tells us that it is, or the priorities that we might have for our families. And so I think taking your children to church, taking your family to church is just really important because it's where we're reminded what our roles are, what is important in our families. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say right now. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking your family to church is incredibly important, right? It strengthens family. And we know that biblically, but we also know that from research. And we know that the whole family going to church together, not just the mom, not just the dad, is important in a child's life. But especially we know from research that the father being present in church makes it much more likely not only that the family will stick together, but that the children will grow up and remain in the church. That's significant, right? There's nothing the world can say. The world claims that our roles are interchangeable, but the facts don't bear out. They actually speak God's truth, which we aren't surprised about, right? Because God's truth is the truth. Yeah, what do you think, Kate?
Yeah, I think what Bonnie said about going to church, I think also just prioritizing intentional family time together. I think society makes it very easy to prioritize sports and screens and other activities. And like even starting from basically kindergarten on, each member of the family is living their own life and doing things completely separate from one another. And that's kind of alarming. We should be able to come together and do things together as a family and spend time together and all have shared activities and values and beliefs and conversations and lives together, because that's why God gave us families, is to live life together.
Yeah. Shared activities, shared meals, right? Taking the time, doing the devotions, praying together, not just on Sunday. There are so many things that we can do together. The world has, if perhaps families homeschool, but if not, I mean, you think of the number of hours a day that a child is away from his or her family, right? And the hours that are left, if we include sports and all these other activities, maybe cutting back on some of those activities so that the family has time together, because these are the gifts God gave you, right? The gifts God gave you in each other, and the opportunity to uphold each other, to strengthen those relationships, uphold each other's lives. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think of for my family, like during COVID. So at that time I was not yet married. So when I got sent home from college, like suddenly my whole family was together and we had all this time. We had online school some, but just gobs of time that we had never had together growing up. Because we did, I mean, family was very important, but we did all go to school and we played sports and had piano lessons and choir and all the things. And it was like the best. I mean, for all of the terrible, awful things that COVID was for many people, it was an amazing thing to be home and have all of this quality time that we just didn't know we needed. And our family, I mean, like completely changed our relationships to each other for the better. So while I would hope we don't need a global pandemic again for that to happen for many people, it's amazing how you don't even realize, because those are good things. Sports and learning to play music and singing in the church choir are all good things, but they can't overtake your family life.
Right. I think of COVID too, and I know I'm always careful to couch it when I say, there are some really good things that happened during that time, and there were some really horrible things that happened too. But my son was sent home from college. I was gifted 9 more months with him living in my home, right? And I didn't realize until he went off to school. I knew I would miss him, but I didn't realize how empty it would be, right? And so when he came home and I thought, okay, I'm just going to enjoy these extra weeks, which became extra months, right? And when he went back, okay, I was ready for that, because again, it was a gift that I wasn't expecting. So, Pastor Fiene.
Yeah, I obviously agree with all of that. So the more we build our families up through prayer, through reading of the scriptures, through receiving of the Lord's gifts in the divine service, the better off our families are, because that's the bread of life that strengthens us, but also strengthens us as a family, because it's the common thing that binds us together. I think I'd also say too, just kind of on that same note, that being rooted in mercy and in joy, I think are very important things. It's like there's a thing that you come to discover as your kids start to get older, that whatever are the things that you don't like about yourself, you will pass on to your children. So I'm very patient with people, but I have a very short temper with things. Like if the toaster doesn't work, I get really frustrated with that. All of my sons do that. I feel terrible about it, but all they need to do is hear it once, and then they do it forever. And if you're taking your kids to church, they're hearing the word, you do offset it and you do fight against it. If you're raising your children in a household that's filled with bitterness and anger, I think as much as there's obviously always things politically as Christians we should be paying attention to, and we should be involved in the processes as God has called us to be. If your kids know more about how much you hate whoever, Nancy Pelosi or whoever the TV is screaming at and you're screaming at with, if they know more about that than what you love, it's not going to end up well for you and your family. So when you build a world for them where mercy and forgiveness are of the utmost importance, where they know that that's what roots us together and enables us to live together in harmony and peace as people. And when you build a world of joy where we live as people who are not despondent over the way the world is, but that we're rejoicing at the victory of Christ that the world is raging against in a futile manner. That really helps bind families together, because those are the kind of bonds that last. If you build a common bond around shared enemies, then people who were once allies will make enemies of each other, because that's how they find peace, is having an enemy. You build a common bond around shared joy of Christ. That's what really lasts.
I think that's an interesting, I'm glad you brought that up. It's an interesting perspective, because I think, just even thinking back to COVID, what were we doing during that time? And I don't know about you, but our family turned the TV off, because there was so much bitterness, right? So much, and it was overwhelming. Right. That bitterness can sneak in.
Yeah, there was something kind of amazing about that I kind of share those same sentiments, that obviously the damage that was done to the world with all of the shutdowns is what it is. And if I could snap my fingers and have it all undone, that would be great. At the same time, with a kind of a sense of mixed emotions, those first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was, were awesome. My kids were off of school. They were doing school for like 2 hours, maybe an online school for like maybe an hour a day, barely. And then we would hang out all day, and you can't watch TV for 10,000 hours a day. Yeah. So you would actually play games together, and you'd talk about things, and you'd go on walks together. And it really was marvelous. So that having so much exposure to each other actually caused you to push away the things that are easy distractions. It really was. So that was fantastic. So the more we can build lives of that, the better off we are. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much to all three of you for joining me today to talk about families, the blessing of family. And I look forward to talking to you more in the future. I hope if you're listening today, if you like the podcast, we appreciate that. Share it with your friends, and God's blessings on your day. Thanks for joining the Y for Life team for today's Table Talk for Life. We hope you're better equipped to address today's life issues and uphold the people God has placed in your path. Be sure to check out our programs and resources at yforlife.org, or email Michelle at yforlife.org to find out more about how you can be a gospel-motivated voice for life. And we hope you'll join us next time, right here at Youth for Life Podcasts.